Hey, this is Danny with Amigo the Devil. You're watching Heavy Consequence on Consequences Sound.
The new album is Born Against. But before we get into the album, I want to talk about, in general, you sing about dark and macabre subjects. On the previous album, Everything is Fine. And on this album as well. But, this whole world has gone through a dark and macabre time, this pandemic. And I wanted to know, how it affected you personally, but also how it informed the new album, Born Against.
I think oddly enough, it definitely threw me, like everyone else, into a very strange isolation, not only physically, but mentally, because of that uncertainty of when things are going to just end or get better, or not even one answer, just when anything is going to happen. And I feel like that uncertainty was definitely more of the isolation than the physical quarantining and separation from socialization. Oddly enough, though, aside from some emotional disruption and depression kicking kind of thing, it really did make me realize the world is dark itself. Things are bad and people deal with problems themselves. So yes, I'm going to continue to sing about, the maybe not so much sunshine and greener pastures, but I didn't want it to be as grim and aggressive as maybe other songs have been topic wise. I mean, there is still some aggression on the record, but a lot of it is from an emotional standpoint. And I really tried to write from a different perspective than I had in the past.
Yeah. And outside of the pandemic, can you talk about maybe some of the overall themes of the album? Before we'll get into some of the specific songs, but before that, some of the overall themes of Born Against.
I think the majority of it has to do with doubt and faith itself. Not so much doubt in faith, but not so much doubting the concept of faith, but doubting faith itself. And is this the right belief? Is this the correct way about having the faith that one may have? And it really led me to believe, a lot of circumstantial. I mean, they are circumstantial stories more than anything, and they are essentially, to some degree, they are fictional, but not necessarily. They are things that people go through. So I kept asking myself, like, are we just born a blank slate? Is that our thing? Are we just born this weird blank canvas, and then life and parents and school and all this starts creating whatever it is that we become, this final work of art? Or are we built pre-programmed with things? And I do believe, that topic, I obviously am not smart enough to figure that out. It was more of that exploration of intention versus purpose, of discovery versus just instinct. And then you can have discovery of instinct and allowing yourself to realize, oh, I believed this was me the whole time, but this is actually me now.
Mm-hmm.
Realizing that I'm more comfortable this way. I'm realizing that I believe this instead of that. And that's okay. That's part of that life structure. But we hold ourselves to such rigid standards of, this is what we were, this is what our friends think we are, this is what our family thinks we are, so we better continue to be this.
Yeah. And people see you with your acoustic guitar, but there's a lot going on in this album sonically that people might not realize, that, it's pretty expansive in terms of genres and whatnot. And I want to talk about, I picked out a few of the songs, some of my favorites. I listened to the album a couple of times. Really, really great. Love the new album. And we'll start off with the opening track, Small Stone. And like, in the middle, all of a sudden I heard this like Elvis Presley, Righteous Brothers, like 1950s, 60s grand, performance. And I was like, whoa, just hit me. And it's like, first of all, incredible vocals on that. And then just that kind of, am I on the right track with that? With like talking about it, the Elvis comparisons and stuff like that?
Absolutely. One of my biggest fears when I was young was singing. Huge fear of mine. And when I started becoming comfortable with singing, I still hadn't really become comfortable with the full spectrum of singing, of how I knew I sang in the car, for example. And I was always very, very scared, regardless of how well the shows were going, regardless of how well anything was happening. I was terrified of singing how I like to sing, for multiple reasons. One, it felt silly coming from me, because usually we judge ourselves for anything we do more than anyone else. And I think on this record, there was a very, very clear opening of heart, to put it lightly, where I kind of decided, like, who cares? Just try it. Just do it. Just do it. And it felt right. It was the kind of thing where we were in the studio and it was a very positive environment. And Bo and Jeff are both very, very motivating people. And it was just something that made sense about it. So I was like, you know what? Let's do it. Let's go for it and do what I wanted to do. What I've always wanted to do. So we did.
Yeah. And you talked about like folk singers as your influences, and we'll get into those a little later. But is it fair to say like you've been also influenced by like Elvis and Roy Orbison and the Righteous Brothers, those big vocals?
100%. Meatloaf, love Meatloaf, Orbison, Elvis, and then I mean on the other side of things, like Chavela Vargas, one of the most impressive vocal performances in the history of music. All of her tunes, all the songs were just crushing, just the epitome of transmitting, of emoting. Oh my God. And that was a big channeling was Chavela. But yeah, I think all the folk singers are more of the storyline aspect of it, and the Cohens and the Waits, and that's like the story aspect of the songs. But I love those big, boomy, just tremmy vocals.
Those crooners, yeah, it's cool stuff. And another song, "Quiet as a Rat," and that one is like a different sonic direction, almost like this kind of Eastern European gypsy, like reminding me a little bit of Gogol Bordello, what they're doing, kind of reviving some of the musicality. Can you talk about that one, both musically and lyrically? Love to hear more about that song.
Lyrically, that song was a completely different song. It was entirely, it sounded, it was very slow. It was like finger picking. And it felt so dramatic when I was playing it slowly that it didn't have the spirit that I wanted it to. And so I think the most obvious influence, and we all get a little more influenced from certain things than others. To me, there's a huge Tom Waits influence on that song. And there's another group I've been listening to a lot over the past few years. I'm sure I'm going to botch the name, but I think it's Taraf the Hydux, or something like that. And I've always seen the name, but I've never heard anyone say it. So they were very much along those same lines. Dr. John, that kind of stuff, just really, really infused a lot of the spirit that I wanted to embody for the lyrical content, because it is that exploration, again, of faith, of doubt, of questioning. And to me, that needed to be a little more, that inquisitive sound. So that became a completely different song. But
another track that's a staff favorite here at Consequence is "Murder at the Bingo Hall," and I find it a really fun track because it seems really dark when you're thinking of it, but then you're like, wait, is he just in there trying to kill it at the game bingo? And not really, is there anything really, maybe there's nothing really criminal going on in here, but I like there's like a lot of stuff going on, but you can talk about that one as well.
Yeah, it's not, it does sound aggressive and ominous and like, oh, what's going to happen is gross. And that one was another one that when I was writing it, I think the first song I've ever written that started with the title. I had to just murder the bingo hall. I was like, I'm going to write that. Whatever. Who cares? And I started writing and I was like, all right, who kills who? And I wrote like 50 different scenarios of how I could creatively write a murder at the bingo hall. And I was going through old murder mysteries and reading these old, God, what are they called? I don't remember. They're like little mystery books. Whatever. And I was reading a bunch of stuff and I was like, all right, let's do like an old school Clue game kind of story. And I wrote it out and I was like, this sucks. This is so obvious. So then that one line, somebody called the cops, I'm killing it, came up and I was like, oh, there it is. No one's dying. There's no death. We're just killing it. And it was so much more fun that way. But I will say when we released that song, I was terrified because I wasn't sure how people were going to take the joke, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, you got to be careful. I mean, with stuff going on. But like when you actually read the lyrics, yeah, he's just killing it at bingo. That's basically what's going on.
He's doing great.
Yeah. And I always like to talk about the last song on every album because it's kind of like it puts a close on the album. Also kind of sets the stage for what's next. But this one is quite a poignant song, Letter from Death Row. And it's stripped down. And, you know, you hear about people, you know, they committed these heinous crimes and stuff. But it's like, I almost got this feeling like no matter what you've done, there's always like someone out there who loves you. And like, you know, that letter that he writes is kind of heart-wrenching. If you can talk about that one a little bit.
Yeah, that song almost didn't make it onto the record. I had a hard time. Usually when I'm writing lyrics, there's a moment where I finish and I put it down and then I analyze everything and I go, all right, how can I make this deeper? How can I make this more relevant to a different dialogue than the obvious one? Letter from Death Row was almost like Murder at the Bingo Hall, very direct. It is a very just fictional narrative, essentially. And I kept trying to find a deeper meaning or this metaphor or something else. And I started reading through all these death row letters. Because I do collect weird things, and that is one of the things I have a lot of. And I realized that none of them are necessarily poetic. None of them are necessarily as deep as you expect. A lot of them are just very, very almost childlike and honest. And it's strange to see that aspect of reverting to something more basic and literally just factual. Just this is how I feel. This is what's happening. There are a lot of them that are just pages and pages of off the rocker stuff, but I didn't use those. So at the end of the day, I was like, this needs to be simple. This needed to be a direct song.
Mm-hmm.
And when we finally decided to put it on the record, I was like, this feels like the perfect way to end a record is the physical end of a story, which is someone being executed, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
It was also interesting to try to write without seeming to glorify the crimes of somebody, but still humanizing them while understanding that they have done bad things.
Yeah.
And it was just an interesting challenge on that one.
Yeah. And you just mentioned this. You talked about, some of the items you collect, and even the setting you had for the Consequence live stream was very cool. You had some skulls in there and whatnot. And I know you are collected of morbid curiosities, if you will, or if can you talk about that a little bit? Your collection, what led you to that, and maybe some of the weirdest things you have.
I've always loved collecting stuff. The first real thing there were these little plastic baseball caps that you would get from, it was a fast food chain. I kind of want to say it was Pizza Hut, but I don't think it was. But anyway, I remember when I was young and they had all the teams, these little plastic baseball caps. And I was like, I literally need all of them. I don't know how I'm going to accomplish. I don't have a car. I don't have money. I don't know how I'm going to accomplish this, but I need all of them. And so when I would go in, if I got the same cap, I'd go up to the front and be like, I need a different one. Like, I can't, because I can't live with the same cap. And then as an adult, or when I considered I was an adult, I started collecting DVDs. And that was my first adventure into finding rarities and finding different versions of things and finding alternates of something, right? So from there, it just kind of spiraled into a bunch of different things. And eventually I realized, you can be a caretaker of history. You can be a keeper of things that have mattered to people in the past. And that attachment led me to the more extreme version of it, which was the osteology aspect of it, which I love bones. I love bones. I always have. They are just the core architecture of what we are. They are the literal frame that carries us from place to place. And I feel like it's a very underrated part of our body. Everyone talks about the heart and the brain, and yes, they're obviously important. The lungs let us breathe, but I mean, without the bones, we're a ball of mush and not really functional in any way. And they are the last thing that remains. And it's like the last bit of the physical story that we get to tell. And, you read all these cases of people discovering, I mean, the fact that you can tell somebody's diet based on their, dentition and all that, like the bone density, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating. So when I realized that I can acquire a lot of these things from old defunct museums or old doctors' offices and things like that, I dove in. I said, that's what I like doing. I think some of the stranger things that I try to avoid buying things or trading for things that are based on shock value. I don't really like collecting via shock value because it seems rude more than anything. So I wouldn't say that the crazier things we have are necessarily shocking, like most people would expect. You got a baby in a jar. I don't. I do have an old dictionary bound in human skin, which is really exciting. But that was a lot more common than people think. The books in human skin, they're just harder to find. One of my favorite pieces is an old letter signed by Helen Keller.
Wow.
Which was fascinating because I didn't realize that she would write with a ruler. You could feel the bottom of the letters. So it's a very, very flawless and very meticulous signature. And I think it's even more exciting to me because that piece itself opened up an entirely new sector of collecting for me. That was the actual the history side of the world, the history side of I mean, I guess bones are history, but not in the same way, Mm-hmm. And it's just crazy to hold something like that. Someone I read about my whole life.
We touched on this the last time I talked to you, like a couple of years ago, but It's funny. I was sent your album, right? And I uploaded it to iTunes, and it came up as country Americana. That's what it came up as the genre. And, you're so unique in that, a lot of your fans come from a heavy metal background, but you yourself are not a metal artist. I know you're a fan, but you have these fans from a metal background. You've been called folk, you've been called Americana. Some people call you alternative country. And can you talk about just having that, maybe those different labels, but where you think you fit, and then maybe talk about your fan base, like people you've met and where they've come from. Do you see fans of metal? Do you see fans of folk? Do you see fans of country coming up to you at shows and whatnot, and what it all means to you?
As far as the fitting in aspect, the genre aspect, it is something that used to plague me a lot more, and I used to dream of fitting in somewhere, so I used to try to find any wording that I could that made the project make sense within a circle. And the more I tried to associate with specific circles and kind of force my way in, the more I realized it doesn't work that way. Like, I can't force my way. So as nonsensical as it is, to me, the most obvious aspect of the Amigo project is the storytelling. That's kind of what I base everything I do on. So that's the folklore aspect of it, the folk part of storytelling. But I'm also not necessarily only influenced by folk in the United States. There's all kinds of world folk that does influence what I do. Is it world folk? No, it's not, but does it encompass a large amount of the influence behind what I do? Yes. And that's I think the largest dilemma is the genre what influences you, or is the genre the final product? And as far as the final product, I feel like we're getting there, but I'm also so inconsistent in my mind, in my brain, that I know the second we figure something out, it'll be different. The next batch will be different. So, as far as the fans, we've been very, very fortunate to have that wide variety of people coming through. And I think one of my favorite conversations I've had was with a very, very devout Christian fan, right? Fan seems like such a weird word for me. Someone who's very devoutly Christian, that listens to Amigo the Devil. And I had a really, really great conversation with them. And they made me realize that the way they take the songs is not necessarily, it's not bashing their belief system or a god or playing on that, satanic panic kind of thing. It really, they understood that it is about the doubt and questioning yourself and finding a higher, truer faith through your own questioning, through your own self. And that was cool. That was cool because I was like, that's what I'm going for. I'm not trying to keep anybody out. There's a couple hateful groups I can think of. Come on. Don't. But overall, it's been incredible to see the variety. And the coolest thing for me is seeing everybody get along at shows for the most part. So this wide variety of people that, this person has never even heard thrash in their life. And this person has made fun of country music their whole life. And they come together and they're like, we can sing together. We got this. For this hour, we get each other. And I feel like a lot of bands have done that for me. There are a lot of bands that I went out to see that had a different fan base that I was like, I'll check out your music if you check out mine. On a fan level, in the crowd. And I've made a lot of friends at shows that have been on the other side of the world musically. And at the end of the day, I'm like, oh, should I do like Cambodian psych? Like, this is awesome. And that's why genre bothers me so much.
Yeah.
Because I feel like people decide they don't like a genre, but every genre has so much music in it that the only thing genre elitism really does is it keeps people from accessing songs that they might not know they need in their lives.
I did want to go through some of your influences and maybe just give me a little bit on each one, some of the ones that you cited as main influences. And I'll just mention the name, and then you can just kind of talk to me about what that person's music meant to you and how they influenced you. That would be great. And one of the influences you always talk about, and one of my personal favorites, and he's also a great actor as well, Tom Waits. His music is great. He's also awesome. If you ever seen him in those Jim Jarmusch films like Down by Law and stuff like that, he's incredible. But talk to me about what he means to you, you know, as an artist and a musician.
I think in the truest form of an artist, it was somebody who was able to separate their personality from, their identity from the person that needed to be singing that song at that moment, while still maintaining the absolute integrity of the person singing. So, I mean, you know, Tom Waits has all the different vocal stylings that he uses for different feels and vibes, and that was one of the first musicians that I remember listening to that didn't make sense in a linear fashion because everything was so different, but everything was still Tom Waits. It didn't matter if it was, you know, Bad as Me or Rain Dogs or just and any of the early years stuff. It was still Tom Waits, but it was completely different from each other. And there was that confidence of presenting something that may have sounded, I don't want to use silly because it's not silly. But I know that there's people who do listen to Tom Waits that are like, blah, 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 about the vocals, essentially. And I was like, man, that's cool. That is a confident thing to really, really present yourself in a form that isn't, that nobody else would consider natural, but is natural to you. And even though I don't have that confidence to present different characters physically, it really did boost the ability or desire, maybe not ability, but my desire to branch out into different sonic landscapes and into different storylines. And I don't know, it just made me feel crazy. Like, I loved it. The first record I heard was, I want to say it was Real Gone. And I'd never heard anything like it in my life. So, yeah, still a big fan. Always will be. And I got Rain Dogs tattooed on my face. So, on my face, that's like side rents. But
nice. And another one you always cite is Leonard Cohen. And there's like, you know, there's a whole generation of fans who just think, oh, he's the guy who wrote the Hallelujah song that Jeff Buckley covered and was covered on him, all those singing competitions, American Idol. But then you go back and you see his body of work and it's incredible as well. Can you talk about, you know, Leonard Cohen, again, what his music means to you as an artist?
I won't even lie to you. Leonard, my infatuation with Leonard Cohen began, it wasn't even initially, it wasn't even lyrically or musically. It was the fact that somebody who did not have a great voice was making beautiful music, like just stunning, just made me sob music. And I was like, that was still in the phase where I was terrified of singing, where one of my big fears was singing. So I remember hearing Leonard Cohen going, oh, maybe I can do this. This is crazy. And then the older I got, the more I understood the lyrics. Because when you're young, Leonard Cohen songs aren't necessarily, you're not latching on to half of those references. And then the older I got, the more I realized, oh, this is something else. This is poetry and emotion. Like, this is unbelievable. And that to me is the epitome of emotional relief, of emotional, almost like relieving the burden of that emotion. I don't want to say necessarily not admittance, not, I don't know how to word it, but it's a very specific version of emotional honesty and transparency that you don't really get in a lot of songwriters. Mm-hmm. They try to mask it with so many different layers, and that was one of the Leonard Cohen and Fiona Apple were the two that made me realize, okay, you can't be anything but honest in the songs you want to write. Even if you're making up a character and writing from third person, every line better be as honest as possible, even if it makes you look bad. Yeah. Even if you are the villain.
And it's funny, the next person I was going to ask you about is Fiona Apple. Fiona Apple is someone, maybe unlike Leonard Cohen or Tom Waits, someone would directly associate with your music. Can you talk about how she's been an influence to you as well?
Fiona Apple has probably been my favorite artist for the longest amount of time. The most consistently my favorite artist. I remember I was young and watching it was Criminal. The first Fiona videos on MTV or whatever.
Yeah, I think it was Criminal, yeah.
Criminal. I was like, what is this? This sounds nothing like what I listened to. I was a kid. And I was just obsessed. Every time the video came out, I was just like. And then when The Pond came out, and that was crazy. That was incredible. That was like artistry beyond anything I could imagine humans were capable of, right? This musicianship above and beyond. And the thing about Fiona Apple that I've loved so much over the years is that it's been a long career with very few records because they're all flawless. And I obviously can't speak for the artistry behind it because I'm not Fiona Apple. But in my mind, it's really cool to have the ability to create purely. And when it needs to be created, as opposed to creating for, any other purpose. Personally, Extraordinary Machine was my absolute shift. And Extraordinary Machine was one of the records that made me want to do music aside from the shitty bands I was playing in. Extraordinary Machine was something else. And that record is I still listen to that almost daily. There are some songs on there that I don't think have ever been matched in the level of aggressive honesty and just the brutality behind it. Lyrically, to me, that's one of the most brutal records ever, aside from maybe the new one, because that's pretty up there. So yeah, thank you, Fiona Apple, for inspiring this little thing over here.
Very cool. And one more for you. And it's been over a year now since fans have really, concert goers have really been able to experience the live show. There's been live streams and virtual concerts, but it hasn't really been that full-on concert experience. Can you talk about what it's going to mean for you as an artist, performing that first real show in front of a full audience, after this pandemic, and what do you think it's going to be? What it's going to mean for those people at the show themselves? Just touch on that a bit.
For the last maybe 6 months, 7 months, I have consistently had the same nightmare. Genuine nightmare. Like, I don't get them often, but I never really had stage fright. After the first few shows, I kind of got over it and realized, oh, okay, people are nice. And the last 6 months, I've been genuinely terrified, mortified, just tormented by my concern of playing again, because it's been so long that every few nights I have the dream. I have a show in like an hour. I didn't practice. I didn't change my strings. None of my gear set up. My pedals are all acting up. Whatever it is, dumb things, the simple, the usual. And 5 minutes before I have to play, or 10 minutes before I have to play, I melt down. I have a breakdown in this nightmare. And then I wake up. So it's been interesting to kind of try to battle through that, because I know at some point I'm going to play a show. I don't think it'll be like that, but it doesn't take the anxiety of it away, right? I do instinctually feel like once we all get together in that room, in that setting, it will be that riding a bike scenario where it's just, oh yeah, this is what we do. We got it. And I'm sure there will be an extra level of caution with a lot of people, and there will be some sort of discomfort the first few months, maybe. But I'm assuming that if shows are coming back, it will be at a point where the safety is, where the risk is less than the actual safety of the show itself. The other thing I keep thinking of is, in a year where we've all kind of had the same dialogue, well, how are you doing? Oh, sick of this. How are you doing? I'm terrible. It's almost like I'm so terrified of getting stuck in the same routine once it's over of, well, we had a crazy year, didn't we? And just saying the same dumb thing over and over and over again. So it's going to be interesting to kind of reintegrate and redefine what it is to unify in that room together. Aside from that, I am wondering, because one of my favorite things to show is I always go out, say hi, hug everybody, blah, blah, blah. I love that part of tour. I love meeting everybody. I don't know if that's going to be able to happen anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's something that is responsible to do anymore. So there are those questions. Mechanically, how is it going to work? I don't know. Emotionally, I think it'll be instinctual. That was a very long ramble to get to very, very small payoff. I'm sorry.
It's a very good, it's a very good answer. I mean, I think it's going to be very cathartic for both the artists and the concert goers. And I think with you, once you see that first acoustic circle pit, that's then you're gonna say I'm back. That's I still get a good kick. I still tell people about that 2 years later, the acoustic circle pits at the Sonic Temple Festival. I'm like, you should have seen it, man. He's up there with his guitar, just him, and then people are just creating pits right in this middle of this massive festival. So
I do believe that the people that, you are right, there is going to be this immense release of just a year of pent up energy, and maybe the shows will be 10 times crazier than they were. Be cool. I keep saying this. I'll never complain about a heckler again.
Yeah. As long as just to have anyone in front of you. If they're flipping you the bird the whole time, it's fine.
Please just be here. Be here. Let me play some music. Say whatever you want. Yeah.
Well, on that note, I really thank you for your time. Like I said, it's our pleasure to name you the Artist of the Month at Consequence. And, we're really excited to introduce you to a new audience, those who haven't discovered you yet.
I really appreciate y'all so much. Thank you so much for honestly everything you've done and all your kindness and time. It means the world.